So today we're talking with John Scrudato, a legal innovator who is doing something really cool in the open source space for legal.
That's right, absolutely.
A lot of legal tech claim to be designed for users.
Oh God.
And it is going to be seamless. This kind of like almost imaginary world where law firms and corporates don't have legacy systems that are clunky, that are stuck together with duct tape.
Yeah. Well, that's not always true, though, to be fair.
Oh, well, no, certainly not in some organizations.
Often true, yes.
But this claim that legal tech is seamless, I think is greatly exaggerated.
Sure.
But I would like to ask you, what would make legal tech seamless?
I think there's a lot of answers to that question, right? I think, there's internal requirements, as you hinted at, right? There's different systems that exist that you need to work with, for better or for worse, that I think from an engineering perspective, there's oftentimes a tendency to sort of, assume the best case, right? Assume, well, just don't do it that way anymore. Just, don't use this legacy system. Don't collect that data point. Don't make people fill out this form with this particular format. Do it differently. And I think that impulse is frankly an obstacle from the sort of the human-centered design perspective, in that you can say that to an attorney, but when they're working at 110% pace, and you go, well, look, I know you're working flat out and your clients are happy with your service and you're making a lot of money, but there's some other metric that I think is important, and I think you should change what you're doing and do it my way, even though I've never done what you do. You should give it a shot. I think that's a difficult sales pitch. And I think, that's one of the reasons why sometimes it can be hard to get people to change. Because for them, I think it's sort of an adversarial opening, an entree to innovation, right? Right? I think you can get people there. And on some level, you do have to get people to change what they do for some things. But I think, unfortunately, a lot of times, I think sort of the first impulse is, I know you work a certain way, but here's this product, and it's going to make you work completely differently, and you're going to love it. And I think that's a difficult sell for a lot of people.
So essentially, transformation getting in the way of adoption.
Yeah, you have to be an ally, right? You have to come to someone and be like, look, I know how you work, and here's this tool that isn't going to take 30 minutes of your time, that you can kind of just come at, and for whatever this little thing is that you're trying to fix, it kind of makes sense to you. Right? That opening entree, that intro needs to be something that honestly I think you need to be able to explain in 30 seconds.
I mean, it's any elevator pitch, right?
Right?
People's attention span is getting shorter. I think you've got 8 seconds.
Yeah, absolutely. That's everyone's attention span, and then attorneys are so busy. And they're, again, in this day and age with the coronavirus and everything, even more so. That you really have got 10 seconds to basically show, not tell, here's what this is and here's why you should care, right?
Right now there are 2 breeds of legal tech. There's platform plays and point solutions. And it almost sounds like you're saying, go with the point solutions. Just give me discrete little things that solve very specific pain points.
Yes and no. I think from the standpoint of adoption, 100% point solution. If your goal is to show something to someone that will be intuitive and that they'll use and that isn't going to be a huge barrier to adoption, I think definitely the point solution. As point solutions proliferate, the problem you have is that you have people now have data silos. And they have systems where, okay, I put the data into this system, and now I got to take the same data, and I have to put it into this system, and then I have to put it into this system, and that becomes a pain. And there are solutions to that, obviously. I mean, there's all kinds of enterprise search products. There's different kinds of automation platforms, but I think, at least my own personal take here, is a good point solution with a somewhat open architecture that can be integrated either to other point solutions directly or some kind of intermediate platform, I think is probably the route where you'll see the most impactful innovation unfold over time.
Is this a nice segue into your project, the one that you've been working on, Open Legal?
I mean, what I was gonna go back to the early days of open source.
Wow, history lesson.
But I think it's important though, right? I think
so, because it's a cultural difference between the technology sector and
yeah.
the legal sector, and I think there's actually structural barriers
yeah.
to open sourcing in legal.
I think that's right, but again, I think the weird thing is, in other ways, it actually is very much in line with the legal ethos to share.
Yep.
So I think, to that point about, what is the culture? Do people share? I think it's true that law firms as an entity don't have a natural desire to share a lot, but they do, right? You have partners who they chair bar committees, they write books, they participate in industry consortia, so they do, right? And I think that inclination, and even if it's driven by self-interest, right? Like, even if you want to be known as, the expert on securities law when it pertains to, startups and technology, right? Like,
yep.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
It doesn't change the fact that sharing is beneficial,
yep.
and it's already natural. But when it comes to software, I think you're absolutely right that, as an industry, I think it's very much foreign to think that law firms or lawyers or legal technologists or any combination of those would develop and share software. I think that's right.
Interesting, because I was thinking it's actually the opposite.
Okay.
That the know-how lawyers have of what do you do when you see a certain set of circumstances.
Yeah.
These are the facts, these are the laws, what do you do? That's the value lawyers add.
True.
That part, that know-how, it's pretty secret. It's closely guarded by a lot of the lawyers.
Yeah.
So that's the part I think, is the challenge for open sourcing legal.
Let me give you a couple of examples of where I think you're right to a point.
Yep.
And again, we'll get to the software piece of it, but I think you see a similar dynamic in open source software as well, where there's the part that you share and then there's the know-how that you don't, right? And I don't think those are mutually exclusive.
Well, Google's not sharing everything.
Right, exactly, right? Like, look at Facebook, look at Google. Like, Facebook open source React, which for people who are not familiar with it is an amazing open source front-end JavaScript framework that makes it possible to do some incredible stuff on the front end. And it's free. It's free.
Completely free.
Completely free. There's no strings attached, yet Facebook gave it away.
Right, yep.
And I think if we look at law, you see a similar dynamic. So, one example, the National Venture Capital Association in the United States.
Yes.
They have an incredible set of form documents that have been put together by some of the greatest minds in securities law and corporate law in the United States. And if you want to create a venture deal, if you want to paper it, you use those documents. And sure, you might have your version, but they're based on those documents. I think you see that with ISDA, right? ISDA has its own set of form documents, and they do the same thing. I think if we look at bar committees, you see similar dynamics. And even something as, for a lawyer at least, as mundane as case law, right? Like, you don't think of that as a contribution. But in a way it is, right? Because
you're giving away knowledge. You're giving away
you read
what to do.
You read the holding, you read the case law. There's an incredible amount of knowledge that's in those books, in those holdings, that you can go and look through and that is shared. And I think as not an industry, as a profession, where we have an obligation to society, right? And we're trying to, yes, we are running businesses, but we're also trying to serve a valuable social role. I think it's very much a natural inclination that there's some give and take. And that doesn't mean you give away everything, but you give away something. So I think we're there. I think that mindset is there. It's just how we think about the what. Like, what do we give away?
So that's interesting. Now let's go back to the software side.
Sure, yeah.
What are you trying to get people to be comfortable giving away? Where is that line for you?
Yeah, so I think, for me, I took a couple of lessons again from open source software, and even just looking at some of the stuff that Google and Facebook have done. We were talking about React, we're talking about PyTorch and TensorFlow, which are platforms where people do research into machine learning that they can then actually deploy into production settings. And I think one of the things that Google and the AI researchers that work with them have seen is giving people the tools to create is not a negative for somebody who is trying to sell deep learning frameworks or trying to sell the data and the know-how, right?
Yep.
I think there's some recognition that having more people know how to do things in a certain way that creates standardization, that creates structure, that then speeds up everyone's workflow is beneficial to everyone.
Yep.
And so one of my frustrations in dealing with a lot of legal problems is it rhymes, but it's not the same, right? Like you have,
Interesting.
You're smiling, so I think you kind of know where I'm going.
I know where you're going, and I also really like that phraseology of it rhymes, but it's not quite the same.
Right?
There's a lot of that in law. Like it's similar situations, but requiring different answers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing I've seen, right? Is you'll get, this was from my days when I practiced, right? Like you'll get a deal, and you're kind of working with the same kind of documents that you did before, but it's a little bit different.
Yep.
And if you want to find a tool to help you kind of automate it, a problem you often run into is everyone has their own little way of doing something, right?
Yes.
So if you want to do it your way, then you're unlikely to find someone else who's built a tool for you that does it exactly your way.
Yep.
So what I thought to myself is it possible to start to break these processes and these workflows down into their constituent pieces and find the parts that are shared, where they're not really adding a lot of value, but they're requisite steps to doing some of the more interesting automation projects, to doing some of the more interesting data extraction projects, where it's not the know-how directly, it's the enabling infrastructure.
Okay, so I'm going to use a Lego block analogy.
Okay.
Because I'm a visual kind of person.
Okay.
It's kind of easy to grasp.
Okay.
So if we were to say that the way that the products of lawyers is like the completed Lego model, your Death Star, or your spaceship.
Sure. I think I'm more Millennium Falcon guy, but
Millennium Falcon.
Fair enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Death Star, Millennium Falcon.
Absolutely.
And what you're saying is you are looking for something, or you're trying to get people to share something that is the process for breaking down those outputs into the Lego blocks. Or are you saying sharing of the Lego blocks?
It's a little bit of both. I think there's different situations where it's helpful to do either. To make it a little more concrete though, so one of the projects I've been working on is just kind of a workflow tool that makes it possible to take really small snippets of Python code and string them together, and then basically let someone submit a document, and then it will work on the document and give you the resulting data or document. And so an example of that might be, and this is a very specific application, but you have a true form document where you know it's a form, but it's your form. So the likelihood that someone else is going to have a tool that works with it, it's very small. And you can use, say, something simple like regex to get data out of it. You can write a script that's 10 lines long that can extract the data from that. Now, the classic problem you have is if you had that script and you wanted to give it to a lawyer, God knows you're not going to give them a Python script and say, all right, here's what you do. Go to your command line, you type Python 3 dash, extract such and such .py. No one's going to do that.
It's like giving me a spanner and saying, fix that car.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy. It's crazy. But nor would you go to most likely you wouldn't go to a software development shop and say, look, I've got 1,000 documents and I want to do some data extraction and I need you to build me a web portal to do this.
Right.
Because it wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
So what I thought to myself is, all right, well, what is the actual piece there that's unique? It's the 10 lines of Python code. It's not the platform.
Right.
The platform could be the same. If you had 1 million different templates, it would be the same UI for that example.
It's the same toolbox.
It's the same toolbox. So what I want to do is basically make it possible to hone that knife edge, those 10 lines of code, and deploy them for as many different scenarios as you would want in a way that you don't have to constantly redevelop what you're deploying it to.
So when you say your 10 lines of code, and are you saying you're sharing the 10 lines of code, Or are you saying you're sharing the platform that enables lawyers to write the 10 lines of code?
You've helped me crystallize my response. And again, the response is both, but now I can actually explain that in a clear way.
Yes.
In some cases, it's the one, in some cases, it's the other. As someone who wants to deploy those 10 lines of code for my own purposes, and I'll be honest, there's a selfish aspect to this, it benefits me and it benefits everyone to have that infrastructure available and robust.
Yep.
So if I share that platform and it's maintained and there's eyes on by more than me,
Yep.
it's a stronger platform, it's more mature, it's more stable, and presumably people will extend it.
The React of the world.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. I mean, it benefits Facebook that React is so much more integrated in everything else. And I think there's an altruistic aspect to that, and there's a selfish aspect.
Yep.
The selfish aspect is I've dealt with this problem enough that I know that I'm going to have to keep dealing with it, and I don't want to do it by myself.
Yep.
Right? There's that. And the second piece is, let's say that maybe I was an entrepreneur, and I wanted to make it possible to use my template. I don't know what kind of business I'm running. Maybe I'm automating forms, right? And I want to have a nice data extractor for my platform.
Yep.
Why should I write that infrastructure? And B, why not make my spec available for free? Share those 10 lines of code. So then everyone can use my template.
Yep.
Everyone can extract data from my template.
Yep.
We're all confident in it, and no one has to reinvent the wheel. And so I think there's that answer is it's both. And depending on who you are, it benefits you to do one or the other or both. And I think there's a lot of situations like that. And if we start collaborating and cooperating, we will all benefit. And that's what I want to see.
So it's a very altruistic goal.
Altruistic and selfish.
Well, yes.
Selfish altruism.
I wasn't about to call you selfish.
It's okay. I can take it. I can take it. This is New York, after all. I've been called a lot worse, actually. So it's fine.
Well, I'm still not going to call you that.
Fair.
To your face.
Exactly.
The open sourcing of software that enables the sharing of legal knowledge.
Yeah.
Does that threaten lawyers, and why or why not?
This is not a problem that's unique to lawyers. This is a challenge that every industry that's had a decision point of do we collaborate or do we compete or do we co-opetition?
Co-opetition.
Right? I mean, imperfectly stated, but I think there's sort of like three different ways you can go there, right?
Yes.
We have the closed wall, and we just don't talk to each other. There's the, hey, we're just gonna work together, I love you, you love me, like we're all on the same side, which is clearly not the case.
Right.
And then there's something in the middle. And I think, the question as often is what is your core competency?
Yep.
What is your secret sauce?
Yep.
And I think, if there is something inimical to the software
Yep.
that that's making you competitive and your competitor's not competitive,
Yep.
then in that case, I think you really do have to stop and think, is this something I want to share? But then I have to ask, in the example I gave, what is the cost benefit? If you have a form, say you have 500 copies of your form, and you have a script that can extract data from it perfectly.
Right.
And you only have 500 examples of it, and you're not planning on starting a data business around your form.
Right.
And you're not planning on creating a Mick law firm where you're going to have 10 million copies and you want it to become the standard, and you want everyone to go through you. What is the benefit of maintaining that infrastructure to deliver that extractor to your attorneys? And I mean, frankly, I really don't think that cost benefit makes sense to do all that, maintain it yourself, and eat the cost. I think in that case, again, being selfishly altruistic, it's a clear situation where if you can split that cost 10 ways, that's a benefit. It's a total,
Everybody wins. All 10 people who participate
all 10
are winning.
people, all 10 people. And if you split it 100 ways, even better.
Right.
And if it happens that in the course of splitting that one very specific thing, it also ends up doing 5 other things that are also useful to you, that's a bonus.
Right.
So you have to think carefully, but there's definitely situations, absolutely.
People don't really talk about this idea in the legal space.
Yeah.
I think of everyone I've met, you're probably the only one who's kind of like not just talking about it, but also doing something about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is I'm a damaged person, and this is what I do for fun. So I'm like, well, I might as well get some other people involved.
Yeah. Actually, a correction. You're not the only one.
I was going to say there are others.
There are lots of others.
I was going to say there are others. Yeah.
I mean, Atticus Project is one.
Yeah.
There's
Blackstone is
one.
The Law Society of England and Wales just put that together. Yep.
And there's a couple of others who've also given their code or their data.
Yeah, so I want to, a couple projects worth mentioning. The Accord project, hybrid smart contracts. They have, speaking of React, they have some excellent UI elements.
I didn't know that.
It's really impressive, actually. And then the spec they have for how to split the logic versus the human readable contract versus the data model is really, I think, really well thought out.
Yep.
Then you have some folks who are working on things that are kind of a little more low level, but LexPredict has LexNLP.
They do.
Which is a great piece of software.
Yep.
The library it's Afro GPL licensed, so perhaps less of a great product
Can't
for...
commercialize it, but for anyone who just wants to use it and rely on it, amazing.
Yes. If you want to build a business off it, that could be an issue, but if you just want to use it, it's amazing. It's really good. They also have OpenEdgar, which is also LexPredict, which is another fantastic piece of software.
It is, yes.
LexPredict, another one. So, or is it? No, Contract Suite. Contract Suite
with an X.
By LexPredict, and then, of course, you have kind of more smart contract open source projects, which are, I think a lot of people wouldn't see them as legal, but there is a slow bleed over, I think, into legal applications. So I'd put them in there too. Yeah.
So where do you see yourself fitting into this ecosystem? Where do you see your kind of, extractor, if you like?
I think where I see mine fitting in is it's sort of the Swiss Army knife of automation, right? So I think we talked about this before. There's sort of a lot of point solutions and there's a lot of platforms.
Yep.
And building a platform that can do a lot of different things well is very challenging.
Yep.
That said, there are people who are doing it, and it's a lot of work. It's impressive, and I'm looking at people like you. But I mean, that's there's a place for that, an amazing place for that. And I think there's that kind of product. And then for the point solutions, where there's some task that's shared across a large number of people, such that it's worth building one way of doing it for a large number of clients. It makes sense. There's this donut hole, though, in the middle, where you have some kind of automation project or problem where you can do it with code, and you can probably do it pretty easily. And you could do it at a scale that for human would be a pain in the butt, right? Like, I've got 500 or 1,000 documents. No one's going to build a business off that. And it might be one of those situations where it's so specific that a multi-purpose platform probably, no matter how good it is, isn't going to be suited to it. That's the donut hole. You've got documents coming in, and you want documents coming out or data coming out, and you can do something relatively simply with code. That's where it is. So I think it's sort of maybe a open source low code tool, but specifically for analyzing and automating contracts.
So there's a term I've been trying to float around. It's got zero adoption so far. Nobody's using this. But it's a term I call legal data. And it's the sorts of information that exists and matter pretty much only to lawyers. So not commercial data, not things like dates, numbers, interest rates, so on, which is interesting to non-lawyers as well. But more things like legal concepts, legal drafting, specific phraseologies that have consequences to lawyers or meaning specific to lawyers. And it sounds like your tool strides both of these camps.
Yeah, I think that's right. I like that term, actually, legal data, right? No, credit to you, Horace. I'll adopt it, absolutely. No, legal data and data-driven law, I think it's a great concept, and I think we're going there in some capacity, right? And the challenge becomes you need a slightly different toolkit, and I think you need to look to data science more than you necessarily look to practice or even traditional enterprise software for what kinds of tools do we need when we get there. And that's some of the inspiration I've taken for some of the tools I've developed for open source legal, one of which is the low code tool. I think there's some excellent tools in that frame for data scientists.
Yep.
And there's sort of a similar design, similar architecture where you can design data flows and you kind of have these very discrete little steps that analyze and extract data. And it's the same thing with what I'm trying to do, but it's designed around the idea that you want to work on a document, a contract, and it also has sort of a self-service aspect where once you've developed this, you can make it available to someone who is a non-technical user who can just go in and pick from a menu and say, what do I want to do? I want to extract concepts, I want to extract certain clauses from this type of document, click, add a document, play, done.
Yep.
That's the goal. And it's almost an interface to sort of hide the data science from the lawyers.
Yes.
But still give them the ability to work with them.
Well, it doesn't matter to them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I was watching this great Google lecture. It's by a lady who, I forget her name, which is terrible, but she explained how for data scientists, it's like you want to know how the microwave works.
Yeah.
But for everyone else, you just want to get your hot food.
Yeah, exactly. Well, exactly. It's like what I said before. You can do magic with 10 lines of code, but an attorney doesn't want to see the 10 lines of code.
No,
they want the
want
magic.
The
they want the magic. And we can give it to them. So let's give it to them,
Yep.
And I think, again, in a lot of situations, the data scientist can build the tool.
Yep.
The lawyer could use the tool, but the tooling to bring the two together doesn't exist. And I don't think, and I could be wrong, and maybe I'll regret this, but I don't think that piece is necessarily a business, or if it is, I think there's a much more transformative role that we all can play as legal innovators in making that infrastructure robust and available across the industry, and then just doing the magic.
Yeah.
That's where the cool stuff happens.
You need people as well as the technology.
Yes.
I think that's your greatest challenge, right? How do you get people inside of law firms to go, I know how to write those 10 magic lines.
Right. So that's part of the reason why I think open source also works really well here.
Yes.
And I think it's law firms, as a general rule, there are exceptions, but most of them don't have data scientists.
No.
Or if they do, they have a couple, right?
Who are overwhelmed with.
They're overwhelmed, right? And I think, again, looking back to the early days of open source software, a lot of this stuff that today is world changing started out as a hobby project. It started out as someone had an idea and it needed a lot of work. It needed a lot of people. And if you told someone in 1992, Linux is going to run the world, right? I mean, maybe Linus Torvalds would have said, Linus, would have said, yeah, absolutely. But I think very few other people would have agreed.
No, people would be like, you're crazy. Microsoft is going to dominate forever.
Today, 2021, desktop Linux, while I use it, is not. It's
not mainstream.
It's not mainstream,
No.
And frankly, it might never be mainstream. However, it dominates the server market. Absolutely. It dominates handsets. Android is Linux. I mean, it's Linux plus some stuff, but it's Linux. And again, I think if we go back, a lot of the stuff that today is world changing started out as a hobby project or a meeting of the minds that at the time no one would put money into because it was, maybe one day this will be useful. Would you give me some money, please? And no one's going to give you money for that. But there is a benefit in having infrastructure that is non-monetary. There's, kinship, friendship. There's just simply because you like it, it's fun.
Oh, it makes you feel good.
Makes you feel good. There's that. There's reputational. And I do think long term, if we want the industry to move, we need the tooling to move it. And contributing some things to the industry altruistically, I think also can, if your angle is personal benefit, I think there's that. And I think there's also just, we can do cool stuff. And if we make this stuff happen, if we interest people, we can do that. So to your point about how do you get the people, try to open source stuff, get people who have an inclination, who want to play around with this stuff, say, look, we're both going to do this anyway.
Right.
So I've done some of it. You do other pieces, and now we can both do the fun stuff.
It's like putting a pie on a windowsill, and then like just letting the smell catch your audience.
Yes, exactly.
That is really cool. John, I am so grateful you make time to have a chat. I know I haven't given an intro.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to give the intro at the end and then cut it back to the beginning. So,